Are you ready to turn your dreams into a reality? Then you need to join the next round in the Dream Bigger Mastermind. Get on the waitlist today to secure early access and an exclusive bonus when enrollment opens. It's time to manifest your best life yet. Welcome back to Breathe More. I am here with another special guest, George Castro, who is a recent graduate of my Dream Bigger Mastermind. I say graduate as if you guys completed something. Well, I mean, you did. You completed 6 months of dedicating to yourself and your dreams. But I wanted to bring you on. First of all, well, in this cohort, we did have 3 men, which is the first time in my Dream Bigger Mastermind. I have clients who are men, but they tend to just be private clients. And this was the first time where we had some men in the group, which was amazing for me as a coach, bringing in a different perspective, different energy, different insights was a huge plus, and super grateful for that. But what I love about you, George, is that you are the husband of one of my clients who has been working with me in different capacities, including Dream Bigger Mastermind. She's done my retreats, and it's like a family affair now. And when you reached out at the beginning of this year, I'm getting all my dates confused. And you shared who you were. I was like, oh my gosh, it's working. It's working in the sense where one of my bigger goals is just for folks to heal from their past, to be empowered, to show up authentically without so much of the trauma responses. And I have been able to hold space for a lot of family members. And so when you reached out, and I'm like, yes, the whole family is doing the work. What a beautiful, inspiring example. So I celebrate you, George, and your whole family for taking your healing journey and your expansive journey as a priority. So congrats and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. So looking forward to our chat.
Yes. So let's start. Tell me, what was the process? So Irma, your wife, and she actually did a podcast interview with me earlier this year when we were talking about mentorship. But what did you see when she was part of Mastermind last year that then sparked some interest into you looking into it for yourself?
Yeah, for me, Irma's always had a keen eye for just the business sense and just the business model. And she's always been very driven. Sometimes she just needs that extra push, which I think joining your program was, again, in a positive way, an opportunity for her to understand just how much skills she had in terms of just being able to produce some good results. So I got to see it firsthand. There was an opportunity for her to go through the program. I saw her so invested in the opportunity, and more so just, I think, believing in herself even more and more as each week progressed, which I think was amazing. I mean, I saw the progress. She's a big manifestor as it is, I think. And it's just great to see that energy just amplify week after week after week. So I think that was a big thing for me. It was a motivating factor, I would say, in the sense of I see all the work that she's putting in, and then all of a sudden I start seeing the results that all her hard work is paying off with. So ultimately, it was one of those opportunities where, being in a space where I've been in leadership opportunities and different roles within HR, I wanted to see what the next level for my career was, for my own personal growth, professional growth. And so there was a lot of opportunities there that I wanted to tap into. I just, quite honestly, didn't really know how to tap into a lot of the skills. I've always been, I guess, my worst critic is the best way to put it. And I've always been so hard on myself in terms of just all right, well, you've done this, so what's next and what's next and what's next. So it's never ending. So I was never really fully satisfied with just a lot of the work that I had done. So for me, it was just okay, how do I capture that headspace and get into a better headspace, if that's the right way to align it?
It's so wonderful when a partner is supportive of their partner into encouraging them to do some personal development, to take some trips on their own, to really still see them as an individual and cheer them on. And I know so many of my clients, their couple, it's the same way, their partner. And then at the beginning, the very beginning, there's also some hesitation or questions because it's wait, you're going to pay how much for a program and you're going to get what exactly? So I have found with a lot of my clients, and I think you were someone like that too, where it's pause, because so many of these spaces, I think whether it's intentionally or not, in terms of how I market my programs, I tend to not call out like, this is for women or this is for the divine feminine. Like, I really want to work with anyone, no matter what gender, no matter from what background, who is committed to their growth and who want to show up and do the work. And so when I do get men, I get super excited because I feel like in general, like this gender, the masculine is going through some big transitions. And for all of us, the world is changing. I feel like I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I think it's important to point like what used to work or what used to be expected of the masculine is now being criticized or more is demanded of you. And I have seen in holding space with my male clients, like it's almost like there's this unlearning and questioning of like, who am I now moving forward? Who do I want to become? How do I want to be treated? Like more intentional versus what society has, all these roles and identities have given to you. But with that, there's a lot of dismantling, a lot of shedding, a lot of questioning. And so whenever men decide to take the courageous action of like asking those questions and doing the work and showing up and being vulnerable, I feel like the world definitely needs that so that we don't completely tear it apart and destroy ourselves. And so I want to celebrate you, George, for coming into a space where I don't even know if that was a concern for you. Like, is it going to be all women or like, am I welcomed? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, does that resonate with you or did you have any thoughts around that joining, working with me?
Yeah, so to kind of go back to your original point, I mean, yes, there definitely was skepticism at the very beginning with when Irma came to me and like, hey, I'm doing this program and I'm like, same reaction that you just mentioned is actually pretty funny. It was almost kind of word for word. But, ultimately the goal for me has always been to be as supportive of, as a partner as I could be. And the reality of it was as skeptical as I was at the beginning and even through the first few weeks, the changes that I saw were pretty impactful and quite honestly led me to be a big believer and proponent of the work that she was doing and more so incorporating like ideas of how I could do something similar. Cause ultimately, at the end of the day, your end goal is always to be financially free and just be in a good headspace and just all of these different things that make a difference in our lives. And quite frankly, I struggled with that for many, many years, whether it's my relationship with money, my relationship with family. It's always been a lot of things that I've kept very much compartmentalized inside of me. And to your point, learning more about what the program was and just being the space where you had to be vulnerable and you had to be open and honest. Yeah, there was definitely some hesitation for me there because that's not who I've typically been. But, ultimately, I've been doing some of the work over the course of the last 12 months or so to just really get myself in the right headspace and move in the right direction. Because ultimately, I want to be a better person for not only myself, but also for Irma as well as from a partnership perspective. So there was a lot of hesitation there, but I think ultimately, I think the one thing that resonated really well with me over the first, even just the first couple of weeks in the program was just how welcoming you were, how welcoming our group was. And I think that also made it a lot easier to be a little bit more vulnerable in that space. It took me some time, as you might recall. I mean, it was definitely a challenge to kind of go through the emotions and just get through that process of like, okay, you've got to open up and you've got to be okay with sharing some of these details. Otherwise, like, how are you truly going to be guided down the right path if you can't own up to a lot of the things that you're struggling with? So it's been a work in progress. I feel like even over the last 6 months, it's chipped away quite a bit from where I was when I first came into the program itself.
I mean, you're a different person.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like truly, basically, whoever completes a program with me, they're always a different person. And I don't say it just lightly. Like truly the work that we do is like deep and profound. Like even in my group coaching program, like people have breakdowns, like people cry because we are getting to the core of what keeps blocking us. Like you have had so many stories that you've had to dismantle identities. And George is someone like professionally, he mentioned he works in HR. You also are a teacher. Like you do a lot of space holding for people. And so this was a different role that you were stepping into, right? Like you're no longer the one leading the meetings or teaching a class, like you were the one receiving. And I really want to commend you for as uncomfortable as it may have felt for you, like stepping in and sharing who you were and sharing, like you were so instrumental in like also giving advice to people, especially when they were navigating their partnerships and giving suggestions. I know so many people in the group like really valued that and we're grateful for that. But with that, like you just dove in. That's how I remember it, where yeah, it was uncomfortable, but you really leaned into the discomfort and you were one of the first people to right away, first of all, just take action. You came into it from our sales call saying, I've had this idea for years, which is to bring awareness to mental health for men who are in the Latino community. But I haven't done anything with it. And I just need support to like get it out there. I'm like, awesome. I don't know if it was even the first session or basically once you decided to join Mastermind, like he launched his blog. And then from there, it just started to grow. Shortly after that, you manifested a new job. So you're describing your wife as an incredible manifester. You yourself are an incredible manifester.
Yeah.
And then with that, one of the things that I had to continue reflect back to you is how you were speaking about yourself and what you were calling in. So shining light, I think, on some of the self-sabotage and still limiting beliefs that people who set intentions are like, okay, this is what I want. This is how I want it to look. Then they get it into their life. And then they're like, wait a minute, can it really be that easy? Can I really be making that much more money? There must be something wrong. Or if something isn't wrong right now, like something bad or wrong is going to happen soon. Like it's hard for their brain. And this is something that I was coaching you through, to accept that, yeah, life can be easy. Life can be abundant. Good things happen to me all the time. Something bad doesn't have to also happen just because something good happens. I am deserving of this. Like I'm ready to receive. And so that was a lot of the things like George immediately started manifesting. But then his mindset and the beliefs and the identities had to catch up to the new reality that he was creating. Because if he hadn't had that transformation as well in the identities, stories, and mindset, he would have easily fallen back from what I've seen in other people to the old patterns. And then our thoughts are constantly manifesting, right? So if you bring something positive, something that you wanted, and then you're like, no, it's not going to be that good or whatever, going to the negative, I've also have seen it disappear. And because your brain wants to prove you right, right? So that was a lot of the work that George and I did over the last 6 months, because the manifesting, it's like he sets an intention and then the way that I see, I'm like, and then it happens, right? And you also have the follow through, you have the discipline in really taking action. What is your memory of the unfolding of your time in Mastermind?
Yeah. I mean, first off, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, I was very big on like something great happens, but I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop and then something bad comes right after. And I've been guilty of that for, God, I can't even tell you how long. So I honestly will tell you right now, I didn't think that that was something that I was going to be able to break through so quickly and so easily. But I think at the very beginning, it was just the constant reminders that you provided me with in terms of you are enough, you are doing enough, you are in control of your own destiny, so to speak. And that became a huge reality for me. I mean, I think ultimately I started seeing things big picture and realizing that, hey, what I put out there is what I may get back in return. So I need to be very cautious about what I put out there from a manifestation perspective. So it really did make a huge difference. And I think one big thing that I acknowledge too that you really helped me hone in on was taking the small wins. I never did. I never recognized a lot of the wins that we had. I mean, take the move to Boston. That was such a huge life transition that quite honestly, I felt like came and went, and like we packed up our stuff in LA and jumped on a plane and we were in Boston in a matter of a couple months. I mean, literally in a matter of like 2 to 3 months. And I never spent the time to actually acknowledge and recognize the fact, hey, this is a big deal. So that's one thing that I just wanted to just recognize and acknowledge in that sense, because I think you taught me that in the scope of life, you have to sometimes take the big win or take the little wins, because those are always just as important too. So, and I think doing that helped me recognize a lot of the things that I had accomplished or have accomplished so far and will continue to accomplish. Because I think that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, George is very critical of himself. He has really high expectations, which is great because at the same time, like it's what keeps you going, right? But we want to have a different relationship with ourselves. We don't want to be our worst critic. Like we want to be our biggest fan. And so much of, I think, around the healing and mindset and what also helped to reduce feelings of anxiety and the worry is stopping to acknowledge, you know what? I've accomplished a lot in my life. Like, let me stop and celebrate because I know for myself, I've been guilty of this time and time again. It's like, okay, I reach a goal and sometimes I don't even celebrate. It's like, I'm on to the next, but I still don't have this, but I'm still working towards that, or this still hasn't happened. And that makes it really hard as well to integrate the new level that we're at if we're looking to continue to uplevel our life. Like that also requires us to increase our capacity to receive and hold the success, hold the more money you're making, hold the attention or in the responsibilities. Because again, like the way that I like to view our energy or just like how we show up in life is we all have a thermostat setting. And depending on what we've experienced, it's at a certain, let's just say, temperature. If we want to manifest, or if manifesting is a word that you're like, oh, I don't believe in that. Like George, I saw that in Instagram. You're like, I wasn't even a believer in manifesting until I did this program. Just like creating your reality, you have to feel safe at this new temperature because if not, unconsciously, things are going to happen. Your thoughts are going to bring in, and this is not to victim blame, but things will probably happen. Let's just say you get a raise or you get a bonus at work. And it's like, oh my gosh, cool. Like I just got an extra $1,500. Awesome. And then your car breaks down and the bill's $1,500. Well, you're back at the same thermostat temperature that your nervous system, that your unconscious mind is comfortable with. So much of the work that we do in the Dream Bigger Mastermind is changing your mindset, is regulating your body so that when you start manifesting your desires, you can hold it and not just hold it, but that be your new temperature setting, if you will. And that's what we did with George. Like he manifested a job, a new job right away. Can you tell us about that? Because I just think it's so great, like how it all unfolded.
Yeah, it was definitely one of these things where I put myself out on the market to look for a new opportunity. I mean, obviously, I'd moved out here to Boston to work for the city. And, I was ready to take the next step in my career at that point. I felt like I had given what I had needed to give for the opportunity. So I felt like I was ready to take the next leap. So I put myself out there and really, in my head, to your point, started manifesting the idea of getting into a new role, seeing what that would look like. And I was applied for different positions. I heard it from a couple, set up interviews with a few. Things were going pretty well. I saw this one opportunity that really stood out to me, but ultimately I looked at the job description. I'm like, there's no way I qualify for this job. I'm like, I don't have the experience, all these years of experience they're looking for, really super technical. I love technology like the next guy, but I felt like, okay, this is just too big of a reach for me. So out of sight, out of mind. I clicked away from it. And not even a few days later, it went by and I got a phone call from a recruiter for that same position. And he reached out and he's like, hey, listen, we've got this opportunity. Be interested to talk to you, see if there'd be any mutual interest in moving forward with an interview. And so that was on a Tuesday. I remember it was on a Tuesday afternoon that he called me on that and said, sure. I interviewed with my current manager now, and it moved so quickly. I had started on a Tuesday of 1 week through the interview process. And by the following week, I had an offer in hand for the opportunity. So it moved quickly. They were like, we want to have you come on board. And it was bittersweet because Irma was pretty upset at me for not actually originally applying. She's like, you always sell yourself short. You never give yourself enough credit. You're smarter than you think you are. And that is, again, something that I've always struggled with, just acknowledging and recognizing. And this was, I think, I don't want to say the nail in the coffin because certainly the story's not over yet, but it's just really solidified for me that, yeah, I do underestimate a lot of the things that I've done and that I have accomplished. I mean, I think I shared with you in our group a couple weeks ago that I was cleaning up some stuff in our closet and I came across one of my original offer letters when I got into HR about a little over 10 years ago, or one of my first big opportunities in HR. And it was for, I think it was like somewhere under $40,000 a year for this offer. And I look back and I actually reflect on this. It's actually pretty funny because before I came into your program, I'm like, I'm not a manifestor. I'm not a manifestor. I just don't know. I don't know if that's the guy programming in me, and like, we don't believe in manifesting, so to speak. It's just luck half the time. But, I look back and actually, this actually wasn't something I shared with the group, but I look back and I realized like I moved up within my career because that's what I wanted. I wanted to, what's the next step for me? And like, how do I make that happen? And like, what do I need to do? And so, in a way, I was really manifesting a lot of these changes and hoping for a quick jump through the ranks. And now here I am 10 plus years later in a position overseeing an HRI IT team that oversees all of North America, which is a huge deal. I mean, you would have asked me when I got that first offer letter or told me that I would be doing this down the road, I would have probably laughed and said, there's no way. But, that's the negative side of me. But ultimately now I think the sky's the limit. And really, again, this program just helped me snap out of that mindset of just not recognizing, taking the small wins and taking the big wins and celebrating them equally, but much more so just understanding that, again, what I'm truly putting out there is essentially what I'm going to get back in that manner. So it was definitely a huge surprise. It definitely was unexpected from the job perspective on getting this job, but been in the job for 3 months and I haven't looked back yet. So it's been a welcome change and I think a refreshing opportunity.
I think it needed to happen that way because had you applied to that job, I think you wouldn't have been confident. You showed up to that interview because they reached out to you with not caring or like going in with the energy of like, maybe it's not going to
Yeah.
happen. And yet you were moved along. And what I also love about this is because I feel like your energy was so unattached, you didn't take what they told you, which was like, hey, we have a firm salary, like there's no negotiating. And you're like, I'm going to negotiate.
Yeah.
And so you did.
I did. Yeah.
And you got what you wanted.
Yeah.
So I love this experience that you went through so much for all of that and more. Like it feels magical. And I think you're ready to embrace the magic of the universe. Like, I think for me, the way that I like to speak about things is to make it grounded and like I get really triggered with the word woo because I feel like people use it as a way to dismiss it. Yet, if we really stop and ask, like, why am I trying to dismiss it? I think because for a lot of people, they're afraid of their own power. And governments are afraid of having a powerful, intelligent, healthy society because then they couldn't get away with so much of what they get away with or they want to do. And so the more people like yourself who really recognize, oh, so much of my reality has to do with myself, with my thoughts, with what intentions, if any, I set for myself, with how I show up, with the follow through, with how I allow myself to receive or not. That to me is manifesting. And I'm so glad that 6 months later, your brain has so much evidence that you're able to recognize I am the creator, co creator of my life. I have been intentional since the time that I can remember of setting goals for myself, of working towards something. And I trust myself that I do show up, that I'm willing to like do the hard work. And also, I'm now calling in more ease. And I'm really recognizing that I don't have anything to prove anymore. Like I've done the work, I'm here, I'm good at what I do. I have like written messages from past employees telling me what a positive impact I've had in their life. Also, I always coach people when they're interviewing for a new job, when they start to get insecure and the doubt and the imposter syndrome gets activated. I have them think about, do you really think that a company is going to hire someone that they don't see the potential to do the job that they don't believe in? So why don't we also trust them that they know what's up, they know what they want, and maybe they see something in you that you haven't been able to recognize, but also lean into that if it's so hard for you to feel confident in your current skill set or whatever might be like creating the imposter syndrome or hesitation come up. So you've done an amazing job, George. I also want to talk about the other thing. So the reason that he originally joined because he wanted to get this project up and running. So Hombres on the Mend is the blog, and that's also has been a huge step outside of your comfort zone. Can you tell us more about this project and your vision for it?
Yeah, interestingly enough, it started a couple years back in Oaxaca. Had just come off just being in, I think, probably one of the most stressful points of my life. I think coming out of the pandemic, I think as most of us were trying to adjust to a lot of these new norms and just the stresses that we went. From a job perspective, I mean, quite honestly, I had tapped out from the energy and just my clear mind perspective. It was at that moment that I realized that this was something that I had been living with from a mental health perspective for many years. And I just felt like I just never took the moment to recognize that. And I felt like, put it to you this way, this is the first time being in Oaxaca. I was there for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, but it was the first time in my career I've ever taken a leave of absence from work. I took 3 weeks off. And even that was a difficult decision to make because ultimately I've never been one. My mindset was you'll just push through it and you'll get through it and you'll be okay. And quite honestly, I couldn't take it any longer. I had a mental breakdown and I just needed to unplug. So Irma and I went to Oaxaca. We spent a good week there to just decompress. And really, that's where the idea came that I'm like, there have to be more resources for men that are going through similar things. And I just didn't know where to start. And ultimately, one of the things that kind of popped in my head is like, well, what if I'm the one that kind of creates that resource or at least starts shedding some light on some of the things that we as men go through from a mental health perspective. One thing that I've realized is it's very much taboo from a male perspective, especially in the Latino community, to talk about mental health, raise some awareness about it. It's always kind of like, hey, you tripped and fell, you scraped your knee, put some dirt on it, keep moving on. You'll get over it. It'll be fine. In reality, there's a lot of healing that's needed from that end. So for me, it was just, okay, what do I do? How do I raise awareness to this? And I started putting ideas together. And really what it came down to just in deconstructing a lot of this and the thought process was I need to be able to put myself out there as an example of what I've gone through in order for it to have any genuine impact on anybody, so to speak. And the interesting part is that friends and family that know me as the person that's always happy go lucky, always have a smile on my face and never really bring any like major like trauma to the table, so to speak, if that's the right word. But so I know that it came as a surprise to a lot of people that I suffer from anxiety, that I've had some mental breakdowns and depression and all these other things. So especially for, family members to hear that, like my parents and my brother and sister, it was one of these things where it was something that I never really shared out loud with them. So I thought, obviously, I could make an impact on just one person's life. I felt like that was valuable enough for me to do this, it's been great. I mean, the feedback that I've gotten great responses. I've gotten a lot of like, hey, super proud of what you're doing. This is great. I post on LinkedIn sometimes. Other colleagues have reached out and have expressed how they've gone through similar things, but they didn't know how to, talk about it. So it's great to see a lot of the positive responses and more importantly, hearing the feedback saying like, hey, this is something that's needed. Please don't stop, keep going. And I'll be the first to admit that it was I think you know this because I was going through all these emotions, but it has been a couple things. One, it's been a huge weight off of my back to be able to openly speak about these things that I've been going through. But two, it also has put some weight on my shoulders in the sense that it's like it is a lot of responsibility to make sure that I'm putting out the right information and making sure that I'm sharing these stories for a purpose. And so it's been a lot of balancing. It's been a balancing act, but ultimately it's been a rewarding one where I feel like it's only going to get bigger from here. And the goal is to ultimately put as much of a spotlight on men's mental health as I possibly can. And similar to how I am as a leader, just my internal HR teams, as long as I can make an impact on people's life in a positive way, I feel like that's a win across the board. And so that's really what came of all these ideas in Oaxaca. Hombres on the Men was born in Oaxaca, and so was the idea of moving to Boston. So, Oaxaca definitely holds a very special place, and I think in Irma, in my heart, just because a lot of the big life decisions that we've had happened there. And so it's been a pretty sacred place for us and a place that I think we won't ever forget, but definitely something from where Hombres on the Men stemmed from.
I'm so glad that you took that inspiration, what you went through, and you found an opportunity like, hey, what if I share my story so that other people can heal or feel less alone. It's so brave of you and it's so needed. So thank you for your vulnerability and for right away, as soon as you joined Mastermind, it's like you took it finally from being an idea for 3 years and it's like, all right, here we go. And as he just shared, like the response has been incredible. We have bigger projects for it. I say we because I always insert myself like, all right, George, where's the podcast? Okay, where are the men's circles? So I just see this having a whole life on its own and really creating a community. So thank you for creating that space for men because it's so, so needed. Any last words? So, if anybody is thinking about joining Dream Bigger Mastermind, but they're on the fence, they're like, oh, I don't know if I can afford it. Do I have the time? Do I have whatever, all the objections that people have? Like, what would be your recommendation on why they should lean into it?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way for me to describe it is that in life we invest in so many things, but the one thing we usually don't invest in is in ourselves. And the reality is, investing in ourselves actually has probably a much greater reward than a lot of the other things that we invest in. This is an opportunity to reset your mind if you're struggling, like I was for many years, and just trying to figure out where my place was and where I belonged and what I needed to do with my life. It's not an overnight fix. There's work that's needed, but I feel like it's very rewarding work. And at the end of the day, if you really just lean into it, I will genuinely say it's changed my life in such a positive and impactful way that, quite honestly, I think back to the fact, the best way for me to say this as well is like I look back and I'm like, if I hadn't done this program, where would I be today? I'd probably still be at the same job. I probably wouldn't have launched Omadis on the Mend, and I'd probably still be struggling with a lot of the things that I've been struggling for so long. So I think it says a lot that the people that I met in this class working with you, those are all support factors. And it's just one of these engaging communities where you lean on one another and you share each other's wins. And it's just a feel good story altogether. And I think that's the important part to remember.
So good. I'm so proud of you, George. You are such an incredible example of what's possible when you say yes to yourself. And I just love that you just said, like, we invest in so many things, quote unquote, invest, right? And we don't even think about it. But yeah, when it comes to doing something that's truly for you, something that will give you deep transformation, a lot of times there's pause. So thank you for not having that pause and for just going for it and look at all the amazingness that you have created and also manifest into your life. Make sure y'all check out the show notes so that you can read the blog, Hombres on the Mend. Give George a follow as well. And thank you so much for being here, George, and for sharing your
No,
story.
thank you. Appreciate the invite.
And thank you all for listening. And we'll be back real soon. Remember to keep breathing. Bye.